A notice of claim is a document in which we attorneys use to put the City of New York on notice that we're bringing a claim, whatever that claim may be, against them. It gives them the right to do some investigation. It does into our claims. It gives us the ability to do some investigation as well. We're making a claim for the injuries of our clients. We have presently we have two clients that were victims of the collateral shootings at the Empire State Building for their injuries. Well, the investigation into that is still ongoing, of course. We believe that they were direct bullets from the police. Yes. In New York, we're allowed to make a claim. It's called for the jurisdictional amount, and we leave it up to a jury to decide as to what the proper amount of compensation for my client's injuries are. The way it works in New York is a jury is selected. The city will have their opportunities to select from, basically they select from a big jury pool of people. The defendants, who are the city, their attorneys get to pick and choose who they want and who they don't want out of that jury pool. And of course the plaintiff's attorneys, us, we pick who we want and who we don't want. The system provides for a limited amount of this choosing. Ultimately 6 jurors are chosen for the jury. Out of that jury pool, that pool of people, 6 people are chosen, and those 6 people will hear the case. They will make a decision based upon our presentation of the facts and the city's defense against those facts that we present, whether or not our client should be compensated and what that compensation should be. Well, once the jury makes that decision, a judge they will tell the judge, and the judge will make that the decision, and that'll be it. And the only thing the city can do at that point, if they lose, okay, is they can appeal it. They can bring it up to a higher court, and if we lose, of course, we can always appeal it as well. So the Supreme Court of the New York State hears cases like these, and if there's a question as to whether or not the decision was appropriate, either side can ask a higher court to listen, to hear, to see what was decided in the lower court. Very seldom do they overturn the decision of the lower court. What happens in New York? New York has an additional requirement when you're suing the city itself. Okay, New York State has an additional requirement, and that's called the notice of claim requirement. The notice of claim requirement is what we've already done, which is filed a claim on behalf of our clients to put them on notice of that claim. Now, once we do that, the city has the right to ask for a hearing. It's called a 50H hearing. That hearing basically entails a hearing officer will sit like you and I are sitting right here, and they'll be able to question my clients as to the efficacy of their claim. They'll ask questions about who they are, what happened, and what their damages or injuries are. Here, it's part of the judicial system in New York. They work for the city. Okay. When I say judicial system, I meant they work for the city in that they're asking questions on behalf of the city to establish what the claim is in more particularly. The lawsuit, no, the requirement of the 58 of this hearing precedes your ability to file your lawsuit. So the day after, what normally is done by me is that the day after that hearing, okay, unless we feel that there's not a case, the day after we file what we call a summons complaint suing the city of New York. So the notice of claim, the 50H hearing, are precedents. They precede our ability to file a summons complaint. So basically, we're held off by about 3 or 4 months before we can file the actual lawsuit. Here, we're suing the city of New York. Yeah. Okay, but there are questions right now. We're bringing that in Supreme New York Court. The question as to whether or not there is any federal causes of action, okay, is another issue that we're exploring, which means that there's the possibility we may bring it in coincidentally at the same time in federal court. What we're investigating here, okay. What I need to say at the very outset is that we do not question the police, these two patrolmen's right to defend themselves. They had the right. We don't dispute that at all. Okay, the question really is, under the prevailing circumstances, which was on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight, okay, in front of the Empire State Building with perhaps thousands of people, whether the discharge of 16 bullets, okay, resulting in 9 wounded individuals, was proper, whether they used proper professional judgment, whether or not they followed their patrolman's guide, okay? And those are questions that I can't answer right now. Those are questions we are investigating, and that's why we filed the notice of claim. Now, I don't know the answer to these questions yet. I do know that we have 9 people injured. I took a look at, of course, we've looked at surveillance videos, and there's questions as to whether or not the approach of the perpetrator by the police officers was pursuant to patrolman guide. Okay, they knew that he was armed. Whether or not the firings themselves, you see in the photos, you see one of the patrolmen backing up, actually almost running backwards while firing. Whether that was appropriate, I don't know. But the overwhelming, you know, there is no judgment or decision as far as we're concerned as to the policeman's right to defend themselves. They absolutely had to defend themselves. This gentleman was deranged, apparently, and he was armed, and he was dangerous. He did not shoot at them, didn't get a chance to shoot at them. What we're questioning is whether or not the conduct of the policeman in the discharge of 16 bullets and the way they did it was proper, following proper police protocol, and used proper professional judgment. There's a bigger issue that we should all look at here, and we should all take pause for. And this involves the training of these police officers. And I think that this case is extremely important for China, because China is a very populated city, very populated state, with huge populated centers, cities and towns and villages and so forth. The question really is whether or not these police officers were trained appropriately to discharge their firearms in one of the most populated areas of the most populated city in the world. We need to take a look at the training of these police officers in what they experienced, and whether that training was sufficient. If it was insufficient, obviously, then we have a claim against the city for not training them properly. But we should all take pause and think, what about the police department in general? Whether or not the police department in general is trained sufficiently in the discharge of firearms in such a major city. Remember, we're not talking about some small Midwest town in Ohio. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Manhattan, New York City. How much training do they get? How much practice do they get? And I think that this issue may be of concern to China and the cities of China as to whether or not their police are trained well enough in situations like this. We don't want to see another scenario where people are injured like this. Thankfully, none of the civilians died. But now is the time to take a look at that training and see whether or not the training is sufficient. And if not, take a radical course to increase that training so that civilians and collateral damage is not done to other people. The guidelines really is the professional judgment. You know, when it comes to that, I'm going to leave that to the experts. I'm going to leave that to the police to make their decision and see what they determined in their investigation. Of course, we're conducting our own investigation with our own detectives, you know, and so we're going to leave that to the investigation, really. The ultimate decision as to whether or not the discharge of these firearms, the amount of the discharge, the way they were discharged, again, the training of the policemen that acted, is going to be the decision as to whether or not this was done appropriately and properly is in the hands of those 6 people that I mentioned to you before. My opinion as to that is that those people were not in the shoes of those police officers, and they can't make that a real logical, just conclusion that way. I think that we need to take a look at the surveillance tapes. We need to take a look at the patrolman's guide. We need to listen to the witnesses that were there, and we need to come up with a decision, with a rational decision based upon logic and intellect and not guesswork. And let those 6 people hear all of those facts, see all of those videos, and listen to the experts and the witnesses, and let them make that decision, not somebody who, you know, who just is making a rash judgment. There should be no rush to judgment here. Although, you know, I would love that person on my jury. I would say that would be unfair. It's unfair to make that type of quick judgment. Okay, my opinion is that there should be more gun control, especially in major cities and population areas. It's not the guns that kill, obviously, it's the people that kill, but there's far too many guns in far too many hands, and far too many hands in which they shouldn't be placed. We can't keep taking risks and chances because a minority of the population wants to go hunting, wants to use rifles to go hunting. We should have better gun control. There's far too many shootings, far too many murders. If you look at other civilized populations throughout the world, including China, they don't have anything there. The statistics are blatantly, they show that there's far less murders and killings by such weapons. The most important thing here really is to take a look at the training of these officers. I don't think that the bright light of sunshine has shone upon the training of police officers in the city, in New York City, such a major population area. We have to take a look at what it is, how their training is conducted, and what it is they do in order to hold their guns in New York. Are they regularly practiced? And maybe if they are, maybe they need to be increased in light of this incident. Or maybe in Manhattan, they should receive additional training rather than different than they would out in the suburbs or perhaps some of the other boroughs of New York. Manhattan is a very, very tightly populated area with millions of people in a very small area. It's extremely different than the four other boroughs of New York.